When a bank teller disrespects a black woman CEO, a $2 billion deal collapses, exposing the harsh truth of workplace bias. If you want to hear more powerful stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe. Tanya Wells walked into the bank with a sense of purpose. She was a woman on a mission, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, and carrying a briefcase that held the weight of her company's future. It was an important day. She had come to finalize details for a $2 billion partnership that could change everything for her business. As she entered the bank's downtown branch, the modern, sleek interior greeted her, but the atmosphere was far from calm. The hustle and bustle of people going about their business filled the air, yet Tanya kept her focus on the task at hand. She stood in line, waiting her turn, and observed the routine flow of customers moving quickly through the bank. There was nothing out of the ordinary. However, as she approached the counter to present her ID, things took an unexpected turn. The bank teller, who had been serving other customers with a seemingly professional attitude, suddenly locked eyes with Tanya. But instead of offering a warm greeting or the same level of attention she had witnessed with others, the teller's gaze was cold and indifferent. It was as if Tanya's presence didn't warrant the usual courtesy. Tanya, accustomed to these small but sharp reminders of bias in the corporate world, pushed those thoughts aside and offered her ID with a calm, businesslike demeanor. This was simply part of the process, she thought, just another routine in a day that held so much more at stake. But what happened next left her speechless. Without a word, the teller snatched the ID from Tanya's hand and scanned it briefly. Then, in a move that was both jarring and inexplicable, the teller threw the ID back onto the counter. It landed with a loud thud, bouncing slightly before settling, its sharp edges hitting the cold marble surface of the bank's counter. The sound of the ID hitting the surface echoed throughout the otherwise quiet room, drawing the attention of nearby customers. The entire atmosphere in the bank seemed to shift in an instant. People froze, unsure of how to react, while Tanya stood in stunned silence. She had been insulted in the most casual, dismissive way, yet she didn't allow herself to show how deeply hurt she felt. Instead, she calmly reached down, picked up her ID, and returned it to her wallet. But even as she did so, Tanya knew that something had irrevocably changed in that moment. The damage had already been done. The icy, impersonal treatment she had just received was more than just a momentary lapse in professionalism. It was a reminder of the subtle, yet damaging, forces of discrimination that still lingered in the workplace. Tanya stood frozen for a moment, the ID still in her hand, as the sting of the teller's actions slowly settled in. Her first instinct was to walk away, to let it slide, and to focus on the important meeting ahead. After all, she was a CEO with a $2 billion partnership at stake, and this small moment of rudeness shouldn't have the power to derail her focus. But something about the teller's blatant disrespect struck a chord deep within her. It wasn't just the dismissive toss of her ID. It was the deeper, unspoken bias that the incident represented. Tanya, a black woman in a predominantly white corporate world, had encountered this kind of treatment before. The subtle undercurrent of being treated as invisible, underestimated, or, worse yet, as inferior, was a reality that many people of color could relate to. She had risen to the top of her industry through hard work and perseverance. But that didn't mean she was immune to the daily challenges and prejudices that others might not even notice. In that moment, she realized that the action of the teller wasn't a one-off. It was part of a much larger systemic issue she had been battling for years. Taking a deep breath, Tanya chose not to succumb to the anger bubbling inside her. She refused to let the teller's behavior dictate her actions. Instead, she calmly straightened her shoulders, adjusted her suit, and made the decision to confront the situation head-on. With unwavering composure, she requested to speak with the bank manager. Her voice remained calm, her tone professional, but there was a quiet intensity in her words that let the manager know she wasn't backing down. As she relayed the details of the incident, the manager's face reflected shock and disbelief. He immediately apologized, his words filled with concern and remorse. But Tanya knew that an apology wasn't enough. not after what had just happened. It was too little too late. The bank had failed her in a way that transcended simple customer service. This was a matter of respect, and it could no longer be overlooked. The aftermath of the incident unfolded in ways that were even more unsettling. Tanya had walked into the bank that morning with a clear goal: to finalize a $2 billion partnership that would change the trajectory of her company's future. The deal was pivotal, not only for her business but for the bank as well, which stood to significantly expand its portfolio by partnering with her successful enterprise. Yet, in the space of a few minutes, that partnership was teetering on the edge of collapse. The disrespect she had experienced wasn't just a random lapse in customer service. It was a symbol of something far more troubling. Tanya had spent years cultivating a reputation for her company, a reputation built on trust, professionalism, and integrity. But in that brief, dismissive moment with the teller, those values were called into question. Tanya knew deep down that this wasn't an isolated incident. Disrespect toward people of color, especially black professionals, wasn't uncommon. She suspected this was part of a larger, unaddressed issue within the institution, a culture of bias that had likely been allowed to fester unchecked for far too long. If nothing changed, incidents like this would continue, undermining the bank's ability to attract and maintain high-profile clients like herself. As she sat in the manager's office, Tanya's mind raced. She could feel the weight of her decision, but it was clear no amount of money could make up for the loss of dignity she had just endured. She stood firm and made the difficult choice. She informed the manager that her company would be severing all ties with the bank, effective immediately. The $2 billion deal that had once seemed like a game-changer for both parties was now off the table. Her words were direct and unwavering. A partnership built on mutual respect is the foundation of any successful business relationship. When that respect is compromised, no financial agreement can justify continuing. She didn't just walk away from a deal. She made it clear that no one, regardless of their title or status, should be treated with such disregard. This was more than a business decision. It was a statement that respect must always come first, no matter the financial stakes. As news of the incident spread, it didn't take long for it to go viral across social media and news outlets. The story of Tanya Wells, a successful black woman CEO, being disrespected by a bank teller in such a blatant manner sent shockwaves through the public. What should have been a routine business transaction turned into a public spectacle that exposed deep-rooted issues of racial discrimination within the corporate world. People, especially on social media, were outraged, not only by the teller's actions, but by the fact that such behavior could still occur in 21st century business settings. The response was swift and intense. Comments flooded in from all corners of the internet, with many questioning how systemic racism could persist, especially in an institution as prestigious as a major bank. The reactions were both emotional and intellectual, with individuals sharing personal stories of similar experiences. Black professionals, in particular, expressed their solidarity with Tanya, emphasizing how familiar the feeling of being disrespected in a professional setting was. Tanya's story became a rallying cry for those who had long been fighting against the subtle but pervasive biases that still hindered career advancement for people of color. The bank, realizing the gravity of the situation, issued a formal statement, apologizing for the incident and expressing regret over the treatment Tanya had received. They promised to investigate the matter and to take the necessary steps to ensure that such an event would never happen again. However, it was clear that the damage had already been done. A mere apology could not undo the harm caused, nor could it erase the stain on the bank's reputation. The real fallout came from the loss of the $2 billion partnership. Customers, investors, and even employees began to question the bank's commitment to diversity and inclusion. How could a bank that allowed such an incident to occur claim to be a leader in the corporate world? The story revealed an uncomfortable truth. Despite all the progress made in recent years, racial discrimination remained a stark reality in many institutions. This was no longer just about one bank teller's actions. It was about the larger cultural and institutional issues that allowed such disrespect to fester. For Tanya Wells, the incident in the bank was more than just a moment of personal hurt. It was a stark reminder of the unique challenges she faced as a Black woman in the corporate world. However, rather than allowing this painful experience to define her, Tanya chose to channel her emotions into something far more powerful: advocacy. She understood that this wasn't just her story. It was the story of countless other people of color who had been subjected to disrespect, prejudice, and systemic bias in professional environments. Instead of shrinking away in silence, she decided to speak out and raise awareness about the importance of respect, equality, and justice in business. Tanya began using her platform to call attention to the racial disparities that still existed within corporate culture. She spoke passionately about the need for businesses to implement meaningful policies that not only addressed overt acts of discrimination, but also tackled the more subtle, insidious forms of bias that were often overlooked. Through interviews, social media posts, and public speaking engagements, she became an advocate for racial justice, encouraging other CEOs and business leaders to prioritize diversity and inclusion in every aspect of their operations. She pushed for training programs, employee resource groups, and clear accountability structures to ensure that incidents like the one she had faced would never be tolerated again. Her decision to walk away from the $2 billion partnership, while painful, sent a loud and clear message to the world. No amount of money or business opportunities could ever justify tolerating racism, disrespect, or discrimination. Tanya's stance wasn't about pride or vengeance. It was about setting a standard. By refusing to accept mistreatment, she made it clear that integrity, respect, and equality were non-negotiable, no matter the financial stakes. Tanya's story quickly became an inspiration to others who had faced similar challenges. Her courage to stand up against injustice resonated deeply with people across industries, particularly those who had long suffered in silence. Through her actions, Tanya proved that it was possible to stand firm in the face of adversity and demand the respect you deserve. Her advocacy has empowered many others to speak out, fostering a new wave of awareness and change in corporate America.